America is not for sale. The words explode across the stage with the fury of a gavel slamming down, and the audience jolts as Zohran Mamdani's voice shakes the air. His eyes burn with fire as he points directly across the stage at his opponent. For too long, this country has been treated like a playground for billionaires, a stage for corporations, a market where human lives are bought and sold. People are starving, families are drowning in debt, neighborhoods are crumbling, and you, Donald Trump, stand here and call it success. That is not success. It is betrayal. The crowd erupts, half roaring with thunderous applause, half shouting back with rage. Cameras zoom in on Trump, his jaw set, his expression defiant, his hand raised as he cuts through the storm with his unmistakable voice. Wrong. Completely wrong. America is the greatest country in the world, and it's great because of business, because of wealth, because of power. People don't want handouts, Zohran. They want bombs. They want strength. They want to win. And under me, they did win. You call it betrayal. I call it success. Look at the stock market. Look at the energy. Look at the pride. Nobody did more for this country than me. Nobody. His supporters roar, fists raised, chants echoing through the hall like a rally. Mamdani doesn't flinch. He slams his fist onto the podium, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Jobs that don't pay rent, jobs that don't cover healthcare, jobs that leave families broken and are not victory. Pride that ignores hunger is not pride. A stock market that celebrates billionaires while workers starve is not strength. It is exploitation. You talk about winning, but who is winning, Donald? The CEOs, the landlords, the rich who fund your campaigns? Because the people, the tenants, the workers, the families are not winning. They are losing everything while you stand here and call it freedom. The audience shakes with chants, one half screaming, Mamdani, Mamdani, while the other half shouts, Trump, Trump. The storm is deafening, but Trump leans forward, his voice booming over it all. You don't understand, Zohran. You never will. Success doesn't come from crying about the system. It comes from fighting, from being tough, from being smart. People who want to succeed can succeed. That's the American dream. And under me, the American dream was alive. Under your ideas, it dies. Because your so-called justice is nothing but socialism, government control, the end of freedom. And America will never accept that the crowd splits in fury, the clash volcanic, the atmosphere electric. Mamdani's voice returns like thunder. And I say the American dream is already dead if a child goes hungry while billionaires build gold-plated towers. The dream is dead if families are forced into homelessness while the wealthy gamble with their futures. The dream is dead if liberty belongs only to those who can afford it. You don't defend freedom, Donald. You defend privilege. And privilege is not the future of this country. The studio shakes under the force of the divided audience. The debate already transformed into a war of visions, two titans locked in battle, and it has only just begun. The roar of the audience is so intense, it feels like the walls might split. Chants of Trump, Trump, clash violently against chants of Mamdani, Mamdani. The moderator tries to speak, but his words are swallowed by the storm. Zohran Mamdani raises his hand, his eyes blazing, and when he speaks, the hall falls just quiet enough to hear him. His voice is fire, unrelenting. Donald, you called this the American dream, but whose dream is it? For the millions buried in debt? For the workers laboring 60 hours a week just to afford groceries? For the families forced to choose between medicine and rent? You parade the dream as though it is alive, but for most Americans, it is a nightmare. And you dare tell them to toughen up, to grind harder, to survive a game that was rigged against them from the start. That is not leadership. That is cruelty dressed in patriotism. His words slice through the noise, igniting the left side of the audience into thunderous applause. Trump leans forward now, his face red with intensity, his voice rising above the chaos like a cannon. You don't get it, Zohran, you really don't. America has never been about guarantees. America has never been about everyone ending up in the same place. It's about opportunity. And under me, we had opportunity like never before. Businesses thrived, jobs came back, people believed again. You talk about families struggling, but I gave them strength. I gave them pride. You want government to hand people everything, to babysit them. That's weakness. That's dependency. That's socialism. And socialism destroys countries. It always has, it always will. His supporters roar in approval, the sound shaking the hall. Mamdani doesn't hesitate. His voice explodes like thunder. And I say what destroys countries is corruption, greed, and the endless worship of wealth. Opportunity without fairness is no opportunity at all. A job that pays starvation wages is not a bomb. It's exploitation. A system where billionaires dodge taxes while working families suffocate, that is not freedom. It's theft. You talk about strength, Donald, but what strength is there in ignoring the suffering of millions? What pride is there in building towers while families live in cars? What greatness is there in calling cruelty a test of character? That is not strength. It is cowardice hiding behind a flag. The audience erupts again, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Trump slams his fist on the podium, his voice booming so loudly it drowns out the chaos. Nobody has done more for America than me. Nobody. I built industries. I put America first. You stand here blaming billionaires, blaming corporations, blaming me. But the truth is simple. Without business, without wealth, without winners, there is nothing. No jobs, no opportunity, no future. You call it theft, I call it success. And America doesn't need lectures from politicians who want to drag it down into mediocrity. America needs winners, and I'm a winner. The right side of the hall roars, their chants echoing like a tidal wave. Mamdani raises his hand, his voice striking back with urgency. And I say America doesn't need winners. It needs justice. Because a nation that celebrates the few while abandoning the many is not a nation rising, it is a nation rotting. You call yourself a winner, Donald, but leadership is not about winning for yourself. It is about ensuring the people do not lose. And under your watch, they lost their homes, their savings, their futures, while you called it greatness. That is not the American dream. It is the American betrayal. The studio erupts again, the clash unstoppable, the debate spiraling into something larger than policy, larger than politics. It is a battle for the soul of the nation, and neither man is willing to yield. The studio feels like a pressure chamber now. Every breath from the crowd, a gust of fuel feeding the blaze. And Zohran Mamdani steps into the noise as if it were wind he can bend, his voice rising with the cadence of a verdict as he says, America cannot be measured by stock tickers and victory speeches when kitchen tables are covered in overdue bills, that a flag does not feed a child and a slogan does not keep a roof over a family's head. And if greatness is defined by how loudly the few can boast while the many are unheard, then that greatness is a hollow drum making noise to hide the silence of the hungry. And he turns to Trump with eyes that do not blink as he adds that patriotism is not a parade of wealth, but a promise that those who build the country will not be left behind by it. That workers are not props for rallies or background for photo ops. They are the engine, the body, the breath of America. And when that breath is short, the nation is suffocating, no matter how many fireworks light the sky. The left side of the hall explodes, and across the stage, Trump leans forward with a grin that looks like a challenge accepted. His voice booming through the din as he says, Zohran loves speeches, very dramatic speeches, but speeches don't build anything and talk doesn't pay wages. That it was under his leadership that energy surged, pipelines moved, deals were made, factories opened, borders were strengthened, pride returned, and if some people are offended by winning, that is their problem, not America's, because greatness requires hard choices and tough leaders, and he was the toughest. And he points out that the people chanting his name are not billionaires. They are workers who want strength, not weakness, competition, not excuses, results, not resentment, and the right side of the audience roars as if to sign the affidavit. Mamdani cuts in so fast the applause barely lands, saying results without justice are monuments built on sand, that a nation cannot stand on a foundation where wages are thin, healthcare is a gamble, and housing is a lottery. That policy is not theater, and leadership is not branding. And when leaders boast while families break, it is not strength, but spectacle. A spectacle that asks the audience to clap while the cast collapses backstage. And he presses further, saying that tax codes carved to reward the very top while hollowing the base are not accidents, but signatures. That calling it growth when profits rise and life expectancy falls is like calling it rain when the roof is leaking and the floor is flooding, because the map may be green on a screen, but on the street the color is red with past due notices and emergency room bills. Trump fires back with a slash of the hand and a cadence that hits like a drumline, insisting that Mamdani wants to punish success, to scare investment, to replace the American engine with bureaucracy, that businesses hire, not politicians. Risk takers innovate, not committees. And borders must be firm or paychecks bleed. And he says every time the left promises fairness, it delivers stagnation and lectures. Every time it promises compassion, it delivers control, and America does not want control. It wants freedom. The freedom to win, to build, to keep what you earn. And if that makes some people angry, that is because losers always hate winners. The hall detonates, cheers turning to boos, turning back to cheers. A sonic tug of war that leaves the moderator mouthing words nobody can hear. Mamdani raises his voice above the storm, refusing to blink, saying freedom is not the privilege to climb by stepping on the backs beneath you. Freedom is the security that when you climb, you do not have to choose between food and rent, medicine and heat. That a free market should not mean a market free of responsibility. And he maps it out like a blueprint: wages that match the cost of living, housing that cannot be treated as a casino chip, healthcare that is not a toll booth, taxes that ask the most of those who have taken the most benefit. And he says these are not chains on ambition, but rails for a train, the structure that lets speed become safety rather than a crash. The reason an economy can move fast without throwing people from the cars. Trump laughs into the mic, not with humor, but with the rhythm of a counterpunch, saying rails become cages and guarantees become anchors. That whenever government promises to make life easy, it makes business impossible. And when business is impossible, there are no jobs. And when there are no jobs, the very people Mamdani claims to protect suffer most. So spare the sermon and show the math. Who pays for all this? How many trillions? How much debt? How many regulations before the factory light goes dark? And he thunders that America is not a social experiment. It is a superpower, and superpowers do not apologize for success. They expand it. The right side swells again. But Mamdani surges forward, saying the math is not a mystery, it is a mirror. Loopholes closed, offshore shelters shut. Speculative games taxed where they extract value without creating it. Investments redirected toward homes and hospitals instead of yachts and share buybacks. And he says, if you call that punishment, you have confessed what you defend, because a system that treats human beings as collateral is not capitalism. It is feudalism with better branding. And he turns to the audience now, voice lower but weightier, asking how many have postponed a doctor's visit, how many have moved because rent rose with no reason except profit, how many have watched savings disappear because one fever spiked at the wrong hour. And the room answers not with words, but with a vibration that feels like held breath aching to exhale. Trump seizes the pause, saying emotion is not evidence and envy is not policy, that he knows deals, he knows strength, he knows leverage, and leverage is how nations win. That under his watch, the world respected America because it respected power, and that power put money in pockets. And he ends with a final stab. People don't need tutors in victimhood. They need leaders who make America unbeatable again. The crowd splits like a rift in earth, one half chanting for muscle, the other for mercy, and in the middle the cameras catch two faces set like stone, a question burning between them. Is a nation judged by how high its richest can climb, or by how far its poorest can fall before someone reaches out a hand? And as the chant becomes a tremor that travels through the floor, the debate readies for a strike that will either weld these arguments into clarity or blow the room apart. The stage is no longer just a platform. It is a battlefield of words. and every sentence lands like artillery. The audience is standing now, not because they were asked to, but because sitting has become impossible. The storm is alive, two camps screaming, booing, chanting, their voices like colliding oceans. Zohran Mamdani raises his hand, not to silence, but to command attention, his voice erupting above the storm. Donald, you brag about power, about leverage, about winning. But winning for who? The billionaire who walks away with more tax breaks? The developer who builds towers of steel while neighborhoods collapse into dust? You stand here and declare America strong while its people work until their bodies break and still cannot afford to live. That is not winning. That is cannibalism. A nation that feeds on its people to fuel its pride is not strong. It is rotting. The crowd detonates in noise, a wave of applause and outrage that rattles the rafters. Trump points at Mamdani, his hand cutting the air like a blade, his voice booming with fury. Rotting? No, Zohran. Under me, America was thriving. Jobs were booming. Markets were exploding. The world respected us again. You want to talk about neighborhoods collapsing? They collapse when there's no business, no growth, no backbone. And that's what you want. Endless regulation, endless handouts, endless control. That kills the American dream, Zohran. That kills the very engine that built this country. I brought it back. You would tear it down. His side roars in approval, chants of USA, USA, drowning out the boos from the other half. Mamdani slams his fist on the podium, his voice thundering with urgency. You did not bring it back. You sold it off piece by piece. You handed the keys of America to the wealthy while millions fell into despair. Jobs without dignity are not victories. Markets that celebrate billionaires while families starve are not growth. Respect that comes from fear is not respect. It is intimidation. And when leaders mistake intimidation for greatness, they do not lead. They bully. You did not rebuild the American dream, Donald. You buried it under debt, corruption, and greed. The audience explodes again, the chants louder, the tension unbearable. Trump leans forward, his voice raw, gravelly, punching through the noise. Zohran, your speeches are dramatic, but they are weak. Weakness disguised as compassion. You want America to cry, to apologize, to kneel. But America does not kneel. America stands. America fights. America wins. And under me, it won big. People want strength, not pity. They want leaders who will crush obstacles, not cry about them. That is the truth, and everybody knows it. His supporters roar, stomping their feet, their chants echoing like thunder. Mamdani fires back instantly, his voice a storm. And I say America does not need bullies. It needs justice, real justice. A justice that does not measure success by the wealth of the few, but by the dignity of the many. A justice that builds schools before walls, hospitals before towers, homes before casinos. A justice that knows compassion is not weakness, but the greatest form of strength, because it means refusing to abandon people when it is easier to ignore them. America is not strong when it abandons its people. America is strong when its people are free from fear, fear of hunger, fear of eviction, fear of sickness. And if you call that weakness, then you have forgotten what it means to lead. The hall trembles under the roar of divided voices, the moderator powerless, the cameras capturing every flash of fury in their faces. Trump slams the podium back, his words like fire. And I say justice without freedom is tyranny. You want to control, you want to dictate, you want to tell people how to live and call it fairness. That is not fairness, that is socialism, that is failure, that is the end of America as we know it. I built greatness. You want to bury it. And the people won't let that happen. The noise crescendos unbearable as chants of Mamdani and Trump crash together like thunderclouds colliding. The battle is not winding down. It is escalating to a breaking point that feels like history itself is holding its breath. The debate has reached its peak, the stage vibrating with the force of a nation's divide. The crowd no longer an audience, but a storm of voices, fists pumping, chants colliding like earthquakes shaking the room. The moderator raises his hands desperately, but is invisible now. This is no longer a conversation guided by questions. This is a collision of two visions so opposed they cannot share the same air without turning it electric. Zohran Mamdani steps forward, his voice carrying like a hammer breaking steel. Donald, you keep calling compassion weakness. You keep calling justice control. But what you defend is not freedom. It is privilege, painted red, white, and blue. You shout about greatness, about winning, about being tough. But tell me, what greatness is there in a child going to bed hungry while billionaires brag about their towers? What victory is there in a family losing their home while corporations stockpile profits? What toughness is there in a nation that lets its people die of illnesses treatable anywhere else in the world? That is not winning. That is surrendering the soul of America to greed. And if you think greed is patriotism, then patriotism has lost its meaning. His words detonate, half the crowd roaring with fire, the other half jeering with rage, the sound crashing like tidal waves. Trump grips the podium, his face hard, his voice sharp as a blade cutting through the chaos. And I say your vision is the real surrender. You want America weak, soft, dependent, begging the government for everything. You want fairness, but fairness kills ambition. You want justice, but your justice kills freedom. America does not win by handing out checks. It wins by building, by competing, by dominating. That is what makes us great. That is what made us strong. And under me, we were strong again. You talk about children, about families, but the truth is, when America is strong, when America is free, everyone benefits. And when America is weak, everyone suffers. Your vision is weakness, Zohran. Mine is strength, and America will always choose strength. His supporters roar so loudly it feels like the ceiling might crack. Mamdani slams his fist on the podium, his final words tearing through the noise like lightning. And I say strength without justice is nothing but violence in disguise. Freedom without dignity is not freedom, it is fraud. A nation that lets its people starve while its leaders boast is not strong, it is broken. A country that builds wealth for the few while millions struggle is not great, it is failing. Real greatness is not measured by markets or towers or chance. It is measured by whether every person, every family, every worker can live with dignity. Without justice, Donald, there is no America worth defending. Without justice, freedom is just a word shouted into the void. The audience explodes, half chanting his name, half screaming in fury, the hall shaking as though the foundations themselves might collapse. Trump leans forward, his final words delivered like a strike of iron. And I say justice without freedom is tyranny. You cannot legislate dignity. You cannot guarantee equality without crushing liberty. And America was not built to be crushed. It was built to win, and it will keep winning. With me, it always will. The noise is unbearable. Chants of Mamdani and Trump colliding into a wall of chaos. The camera zooming in on their faces, locked in defiance. The moderator finally stepping forward to declare the debate over. But nothing is over. The roar of the crowd spills past the studio walls, into living rooms, into streets, into the restless hearts of millions watching. And as the lights fade, as the broadcast ends, the question lingers heavy, haunting, unresolved. Will the future of America belong to justice without freedom, or freedom without justice?